This is season 2, episode 4, and today we have the man himself. Today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is the Kevin MacPhee Show.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I think this will be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Good, Kevin. It's been a while, my friend. It has been a while. I like to see the old winter plumage. When I knew I was having you on, I started growing this, and I thought, perfect. And then you've outdone me. It would take me 14 years to grow something that big.
Well, this is going on about 11 months now. I got a clean shave before Dylan Linde's wedding, who's one of my best friends in poker, and I just didn't want to shave afterwards for a bit. And I started traveling, and I kept thinking, I'll eventually trim the beard at some point. But then COVID hit, got back from my travels, and decided that 2020 was a pretty good year to lean into the homeless guy look. So I got a full-on quarantine beard going on.
How has lockdown been to Kev? Has it been hard, or has it been,
It's a little bit interesting. Obviously, I did a lot of traveling for many years, so being in one place for me is always a little bit awkward. But yeah, it's been pretty good. I got some good adventures in before COVID started. I did a trip to Aussie Millions, and then I went out to New Zealand to visit a friend and played some tournaments there. And then kind of took a spontaneous trip to Uruguay to go play the Party Poker Millions down there. And then came back to Vegas to play the WPT swing, like the Cali swing with some Vegas stuff in there. I played LAPC main event, and then around that time, people were already starting to wear masks at the table, and people were, there's whispers that things are going to get shut down pretty soon. So I went back to Vegas, and I was actually going to have some friends come stay with me for WPT Venetian, but then that got canceled. So I ended up just basically staying in Vegas until my lease ended, which was just here in September. And then ultimately I decided I'd make the move up to Canada because I have dual citizenship, and seems like a better place to wait out the pandemic. Plus I could hopefully get some skiing done up here. So should be pretty looking forward to that. Hopefully it'll be nice.
So you're in Canada, the mountain regions in Canada. Is that right at the moment, or?
Yeah, I'm in Canmore, Alberta. So it's in the Banff area, if anybody's familiar with that. There's a lot of really world-class ski mountains around here. And I have some friends that moved up here and to kind of hunker down through the COVID pandemic. And so Stephen Chidwick and his wife, Maureen, who I'm very good friends with, they just bought a house up here. So he had sent me some pictures, and it seemed like a really beautiful place. I had a friend that was quite insistent that I come up and stay with him in Red Deer, Alberta. So right now I'm doing my quarantine. I'm halfway through my 2 weeks. I've just been staying inside this little condo for the last 2 weeks without any interaction with anybody. So it's been kind of interesting, but yeah, I'm just kind of looking forward to enjoying what Canada has to offer. Much lower COVID rates up here, and a lot more online poker options. And with live poker getting shut down in Vegas, it certainly made sense to exercise my right as a Canadian citizen to come up here. So.
Brilliant. Is Canada, is it open at all, or is it locked down? I know you said you're locking down yourself, but what is it like in the outside world? Do you not know?
I just don't know. I mean, literally, they gave me very strict protocols about what I'm supposed to be doing when I cross the border. And, they've checked up on me, a couple of times. So, well, just via phone calls or whatever. But I don't really know what it's like outside. I mean, I drove through the town. It looked like there's plenty of people out and about. I imagine there's still a lot of people wanting to go out and live their lives right now, but I don't really have a metric to guide me in how loose or how tight things are with regulations here. It seems like they're pretty aware of the severity of the situation, trying to keep the spread down. But of course, I'm in a mountain town where there's a lot of tourists coming through, so I'm sure it's still an issue here. But I think the COVID rates are much lower in Alberta as opposed to, like, say, Las Vegas or even back home in Idaho, where I'm originally from. So
yeah, because I've seen a lot of videos coming out of Vegas, and a lot of the poker rooms have reopened. What's your thoughts on getting back to normal down there, as it were? Do you think it's a good idea, or?
Well, I mean, yeah, I certainly believe in people's right to go and open the casinos. I mean, it's a difficult time right now. I mean, how do you how do you weigh the economic costs against the value of human life? It's a very real discussion, you know, and the casinos are obviously a very integral part of the economy down there. We employ pretty much everybody, and we don't want the economy to collapse, and we don't want the casinos to be closed forever. But just as my personal preference, I'm a little bit paranoid about, you know, the pandemic and such. And I understand that the people who are going and playing the tournaments are probably the more risk-averse people. I mean, the first people to line up to get in a poker room are probably the people that are doing more risky behaviors, you know, away from the poker room as well.
Yeah.
So I know they started running some tournaments, and I'd seen some friends showing up for some Venetian and Win tournaments and stuff like that. It's not something that really interested me. A lot of those tournaments are pretty low buy-in anyways, and I can get a lot more volume in online. So for right now, just, you know, I took a couple of years off from playing poker full time. I'm just trying to get back into the swing of things. You know, you take 2 years off of this game and you just realize like how far you are behind everybody and how much studying I have to do to keep up. So yeah, I'm just trying to, the pandemic has been good in that respect because I really needed to sit down and focus on my poker game and try to improve it. So it's been a blessing in that respect, but obviously there's been a lot of other things we've had to sacrifice. So it hasn't been the best year, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's a long road ahead, but fingers crossed we can all come through it better.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's a little frustrating in the States where we have very real discussions that we have to have as a society about what we should be doing and how we should be handling it. But when a lot of the narrative around it in the States is like, is it real? Is it just like the flu? Is it a hoax? You know, it's like, it's a little bit frustrating engaging with people, especially like my family and some friends back home that don't take it as seriously, where now COVID is spiking like super hard there. They didn't get it initially, but you know, they've been pretty loose. They don't have a statewide mask mandate there. So yeah, I just think it's a tough time, man. You know, people are trying to deal with it the best they can. And for me, being in Canada seems like the best option. So.
Just get the fuck out of Dodge, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of civil unrest, you know, and like even in Vegas, there's been a lot of petty crimes and like fights and shootings on the Strip in places where like you would never think that would happen. And it's because there's a lot more risk-averse people coming to Vegas. You know, they're none of the rich whales are coming to Vegas. They don't want to risk getting COVID, you know, and a lot of the people that are coming to Vegas to help us reopen our economy are the people that are getting deals on flights, getting deals on hotel rooms. And, you know, it's a little different class of people on the Strip. So I really haven't been to the Strip at all since, you know, March, basically. I think the last tournament I played was just probably, I guess, a Venetian or something like that. But it's been a while since I've even stepped foot in the casino.
Yeah. Do you miss it? I know it's going to sound like a stupid question.
Well, I mean, yeah, I have a lot of experience in live poker. So, you know, the game theory optimal guys that are in the lab studying Pio Solver, they have a huge edge on me in online games. But, you know, I have the wealth of experience to just look at somebody and basically see if they're full of crap or whatever. And I have a wealth of experience to draw on for live poker. So obviously live poker has been my bread and butter. I mean, I came up as an online player, obviously, but I really enjoy live poker. It just feels so much more contextual and dynamic than just playing online and just looking at variables and stuff. Like actually looking at a person, seeing if they're nervous, seeing if they're impatient or what have you. I don't get to have that anymore. So yeah, it's been a little frustrating, and I definitely miss it. And I miss traveling, you know. That was a great passion of mine. So definitely miss traveling.
Yeah, it's the same as a lot of myself and a lot of my friend work colleagues. You're traveling for the best part of 3/4 of a year, and to go from that to that is, but you know, it can't be helped. We've all got to be part of the solution and not part of the problem, and hopefully it will be over sooner rather than later.
Indeed. Well, I did actually leave the country for a little bit to play. I was playing the World Series of Poker bracelet events on the Nevada site all the way up until the start of August. And then around the start of August, my best friend, Dylan Linde, who I was talking about before, he rented a place in Mexico, and then I went down with him and his wife. And they've been super careful. They basically just stayed inside and not really interacted with too many people. And I went down to Mexico with them and crossed the border. And it was fairly strange crossing a border in the middle of a pandemic, because I really hadn't been outside for quite some time, and interacting with people and stuff like that. But we just rented an Airbnb and had a few people there that we just grinded the World Series on. And eventually I came back to Vegas to move out of my place and make the push to move up to Canada. So I went from being in Vegas to Mexico, back to Vegas, and then driving 16 hours north to Idaho, where I'm from, and then staying with my parents for a couple of days, and then eventually driving another 8 hours up here. So it was about, my car's driven all the way from Mexico to Canada in the last few months here. So it's kind of funny.
At least you've settled a bit now, and you can hopefully get your head down once this quarantine's over and kick some ass and get some skiing done.
Yeah, that's the hope. I mean, I think that the ski resorts are actually opening pretty soon. I think the beginning of November is when the first ones are opening. So I don't have set up for a permanent residence here yet. I'm just kind of relying on the kindness of some friends to put me up for a bit until I get things a little more settled. Obviously, I'm a Canadian citizen, but I'm not a resident. A big incentive of moving up here is getting health insurance. I mean, we don't really have any of that in the States. I had health insurance for a bit, but it lapsed, and I would really like to just have the ability, if I get sick, to not be bankrupt, so I have to establish residency here and apply for my insurance cards and stuff. So there's a little bit of BS I have to wade through, but luckily I'll just have people that are hosting me for a month or so until I figure out what my more permanent plan is. But basically I'm just going to move to Canmore and ski a bunch and play online poker and become a ski bum. I got my good ski bum beard, so I'm ready for the ski season.
Well, some would say ski bum beard, or some would say deliverance beard.
Oh yeah.
But no, it's
I definitely look like I'm from Idaho now, that's for sure.
Anyway, so we'll kick on with this, Kevin. You were born 1980, and you were born and raised in Idaho. A little place that, even though you told me the name of it, it's
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
There we go. And it was Americanized, you said. It's a French sort of name, but it's been Americanized?
Yeah, I mean, all this part of the country wasn't originally under the U.S., right? It was discovered by French fur trappers, and I believe it translates to the heart of the awl, which is like the threading needle that you have. So there's the lake is fed in by a river and then feeds out a river, and kind of the town is based around where the lake and the river meet. But it's a really beautiful place. Honestly, anybody who hasn't been to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho before probably doesn't understand how beautiful it is, but it is really world-class. One of the most beautiful places that I've ever been. I've been to a lot of places in my travels, and I just feel a lot of gratitude and super happy that I got to be raised in such a nice spot. I mean, my backyard was the lake when I was growing up, and we did fishing and swimming and even competitive sail racing. My dad had a sailboat and stuff. So it was a really great place to live. And I really enjoy going back there still. So it's always going to be my home and where my heart is.
I was going to say, but you've just answered the next one. What was it like growing up? I mean, you were born, as I said, 1980 to Mum Carol, Father John. You've got two brothers. Growing up on the lake with them, obviously you said the experience of having the lake, doing fishing, you were never bored. Now, your mother, was your high school teacher, or?
Yeah, so basically all my family, there's a lot of my family that are teachers and or professors. Like my grandfather was a professor of fisheries in University of British Columbia, and my dad was born up there in Vancouver, so that's why I have the ability to have Canadian citizenship. My uncle was an economics professor at University of Nebraska. My mom was an English teacher, also specialized in yearbook and newspaper. So I am really a mama's boy. I took my mother's class when I was in high school for 4 years. So I had my mother once a period for all 4 years of high school, which I'm sure is pretty unconventional, but we worked pretty well together. I was the editor of the yearbook, and man, I did like a lot of activities in high school. I wasn't like the best student. I got kind of bored easily, but I don't think there's anybody that did more activities than me in high school. So I did her newspaper class, and I also did her yearbook class, and then I did a variety of other things like chess club, math competitions, debate, things like that. So I just really enjoyed the extracurricular activities that the school offered. So, but yeah, it was certainly strange having your mom as a teacher. I would just call her Mrs. MacPhee. And honestly, like other people in the class didn't even know. Like one year, one of the students was like, "Why are you always hanging in here like after class? I don't get it." And I just, I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, "She's my mom." She's like, "Oh, she's your mom?" And we've been like going to classes for like 4 or 5 months. So I always called her Mrs. MacPhee, and she never treated me any different. But it was nice to get to see that side of my mom. She's a super nice lady, and everybody was, everybody just has the nicest things to say about her. She's really a fantastic teacher, has touched a lot of people's lives. So that was definitely interesting getting to see that side of her besides just, being a mom at home.
And your dad, John, he was a banker, but he kind of got you into that was where the poker stroke gambling thing came from?
Well, yeah, my dad was a banker, and, when I was a kid, we were really into like sports cards. And I just had like an encyclopedia knowledge of like all sports when I was really young. And he got into fantasy football at the very inception of fantasy football. I mean, he must have been in a league about 35 years ago or something, maybe even longer. Maybe like he's been doing it for a long time. And I would always show up to his fantasy football drafts and help him with his team or whatever. And all the guys knew me. He was like a group of lawyers and businessmen and bankers that were all, from the same town. And they put up a little money and then they'd draft their teams and there'd be prizes at the end. Well, one year, one of the guys didn't show up. He couldn't make the draft. And so he asked my dad, he's like, "Can Kevin draft my team? And I'll just, if we make any money, I'll just give him the profits." Right. So here I was like 13 years old drafting a fantasy football team against all of these, pillars of the community. And I absolutely crushed them all. And I scooped the whole league and I won like $1,000. And he just gave me the full 1,000. I was like 13 years old, So I was like, this gambling thing seems pretty sweet, And my dad had all the guys over for poker nights and stuff. So they'd play all the different like draw games and stud games and stuff. So, and I'd always sneak in there when I was a kid because they had nice snacks and stuff, and I'd watch the game. So like I was introduced to games, at a very young age. Poker was always kind of around. My grandfather was a grandmaster bridge player. My dad competed in U.S. nationals chess tournaments and had me competing in chess tournaments at a very young age. And then, like you said, I had 2 brothers, and we lived on the lake. We didn't have cable television. We didn't have internet.
You didn't need it.
So all we did was play games. We played Risk, Monopoly, Stratego, chess, like any sort of card games. A lot of cribbage. My grandfather on my mother's side was a fantastic cribbage player. And I don't know if many poker players know about cribbage, but it's a pretty fun game. So I really just had like a lot of games around me growing up. So I just kind of turned into a gamer, kind of nerd guy, but worked out pretty well.
Because you, from an early age, you kind of got into early age Magic the Gathering. You were top 1.
Yeah, I mean, well, when I was in college, let me just preface it. I got into Magic the Gathering in high school. A bunch of my stoner friends were playing it, and I was kind of making fun of them. And then one day, I actually we used to play chess against you. I used to play chess against these same friends. We play speed chess out in the coffee shop, and then they pull out their Magic decks. And then one of my buddies had introduced me to it and let me play with his deck, and I was like, wow, this is pretty sweet. It's kind of like baseball cards, except there's actually like a function for each card, and they have like an intrinsic value, So I pretty much transitioned from being an avid baseball card, sports card collector into Magic the Gathering. And I just started beating all my friends all the time to the point where it wasn't really competitive anymore. And I figured out that they ran tournaments at a local gaming shop, and I went there, and they have like the similar rating system to chess back then. So you'd beat somebody and you could track your rating system through sanctioned tournaments and stuff. And I got really obsessed with that. So like when I eventually went to college, I was playing Magic a lot in my free time, playing it online, traveling to pro tour qualifiers, because Magic the Gathering actually has its own professional tour. Brilliant. That Wizards of the Coast was sponsoring back then. So you could qualify in the tournament regionally and then go play like basically a free roll tournament would be like 30K up top, And I qualified for the Pro Tour 3 different times. I only competed 1 time, but I did quite well. I didn't make the money, but I made day 2, and I beat some like pretty big legends in the game. But it's just like, it's a game that's very similar to poker in the fact that you have resource management and incomplete information. There's sizing up your opponents. There's reading, situational reading their hand. So, and it's actually a more difficult, complicated game than poker that people actually try at. Like, you go to the casino sometimes, people are just drinking and like pissing around their chips. And like, it just seemed like a far cry when I stepped into a casino to play poker from the competitive Magic arena that I was in before. So it was a pretty seamless transition when I finally did discover poker. So
that's where you met your good friend, Dylan Linde. Is it Linde? That's how you pronounce it, right?
Linde, yeah.
Yeah. That's how you met Dylan through Magic the Gathering, is that right?
Yeah. It was at, well, I had met his dorm mate at a tournament up in Coeur d'Alene. And then we're at University of Idaho, which is in Moscow, Idaho. It's a little farming college town about an hour and a half from where I grew up. And I was at a strip mall playing a Magic tournament. It was sanctioned. And I was trying to get cards because I was going to go play this big qualifying tournament in Boise. And I just started talking with him, and he seemed super clever and really smart. And, you know, we had a lot of things in common. So I just made plans to hang out with him, and we started playing a lot together and eventually created a team with him and his dorm mate at the time. And we traveled around to all the tournaments in the Pacific Northwest. So we went to like Seattle, Vancouver, Portland, Boise. And it's pretty similar to like going to a poker tournament, because you start off in a big crowded room. You know, it's like an open event, the same as like the beginning of a poker tournament. And by the end of the day, you're in the corner of the room, and you're at the final 8, which is very similar to like a final table. You get a pin if you made top 8. And I still have a collection of those around here somewhere. But yeah, it was just, and then like Dave Williams, who I'd followed from the Magic scene, he got second against Greg Raymer in the World Series of Poker. And that was kind of validating towards anybody who is playing Magic and trying to transition into poker. And I'm like, wow, if this guy can do it, like definitely we can do it. It seemed like the success rate of Magic players crossing over was just so much higher than like any other game, like even more so than like chess. Maybe like backgammon is something comparable, or like StarCraft, just something that's really all about resource management and something that's highly competitive. So yeah, it was a pretty smooth transition, I'd say.
Because you studied in the University of Idaho State, is that right? And you got your
University of Idaho. University of Idaho, the Vandals. Yeah, and that's in Moscow, Idaho. So my grandfather was professor there. All my uncles went there. My mom and my dad met at that university. Both my brothers went there. So it's just like very much a family institution. Plus it was an in-state tuition, so it was much cheaper. And they had a pretty good engineering school. So when I went down there, I decided I'd try engineering as a major, and then quickly learned that I wasn't really cut out for the massive amount of work that they were doing. So while I was there, I bounced around majors quite a few times, and I actually dropped out a couple times too. I just couldn't really find anything that was like clicking for me. I went from engineering to computer science to education. Oh, actually, I first started in philosophy, but that really didn't last very long. And then from education, I ended up in like television and film production, which I never finished. I actually only have a general studies degree. So I do have a degree. It took me 7 years to get my undergrad degree. And like, I don't regret it at all, because I had some great times, like absolutely wild times. But, you know, obviously, like I never used my degree. Once I finished it, I pretty much just went straight into poker and never got a normal job.
Yeah, because you said you done the transition from Magic to poker. You kind of got into poker by watching, like a lot of people do, rounders, playing poker with friends. I say Dylan, and I think you mentioned Carter Gill. Was Carter?
Yeah, well, those are really, once I got out of university, those are the guys that I really latched onto. But initially I was just, you know, I was, like I said, I was in debate in high school, and I helped co-found and was the president of the University of Idaho debate team at University of Idaho. And some of the guys that were on the team with me, we just watched rounders one time. We were, you know, drinking and smoking weed, and we decided we'd look up the rules to this game, and we started playing all the time. And we really decided that we'd get good when our old pot dealer would come over, and he'd sell us like $40 worth of weed. And then he was asked to sit in the game with us, and then he would just immediately lose it back. So it was like, okay, I'm a 7-year 7-year college student that like basically parties and has fun. And now all of a sudden I can figure out a way to get like free weed. Needless to say, I wanted to get very good at the game. So
brilliant. And then it was at one of these games, you seen one of the guys playing online on Party Poker?
yeah. So we were doing a home game with a bunch of our buddies, and we do a tournament to start the night, and then after the tournament we do like a little cash game, like $100 buy-in or something like that. And you bust out of the tournament, or you have to sit around and wait to get into the game. So one guy busted out of the tournament one night and he fired up Party Poker. This is probably like in 2004 or 2005 or something. And when I busted out, I was just like looking over his shoulder. I'm like, wait, what's this? Because I was a huge Magic the Gathering online player. Like you mentioned before, I got up to like top 10, maybe. I think I actually was number one composite ranking on the system. Really doesn't mean anything, but it was kind of like a cool thing. You don't get anything for it, but yeah, it was just like, it just seemed like very similar to what I was doing with Magic, except just easier. And then you could actually like make really good money at it. So the last year I was in school during winter break, Dylan went home, and our other roommate, Peter Johnson, who is a fantastic card player, but just a Magic guy, basically. They both went home, and I stuck around for winter break, and I just played Party Poker, like cash games, short stacking, $1, $2, no limit. If I'd hit and run people relentlessly, I mean, I really just, if I made like 15 or 20 bucks, I'd just pick up from the table and cash it, and I made like 5K over winter break, which for me at the time was pretty big money. And I was like, wow, this seems pretty real, So I kind of put it to the side when I finished off my studies. And then when I graduated, I was playing at night kind of to help support the bills. And I was living with my girlfriend at the time. And I was looking for these jobs, and with a general studies degree, and jobs you're looking for are not great. I was looking at like car salesman and insurance agent and stuff like that. And pretty quickly, I realized that, because I was tracking all my poker winnings and everything, and constantly reinvesting into improving my game and such. And I was looking at my graphs, and I was just like, man, I'm making way more money, like on an hourly rate, than I would be in any of these other jobs. I'm like, I just don't understand why I'm not devoting myself to this full time. So I had a pretty lengthy conversation with my girlfriend at the time about just trying to go pro full time. And I mean, this isn't like going pro like on the circuit or anything. Mm-hmm. Like I was just trying out to make an income from it. And I mean, my parents certainly weren't happy about it at the time. I mean, they came around eventually, but they certainly weren't happy about it at the time. They wanted me to be applying my skills in other ways. But I had the graphs, I had the data to show that it was working. And I stuck with it like that for a couple of years, where I really never had over a $10,000 bankroll. I was playing $11 and $22 180 man some Poker Stars way back in the day, and just firing everyone that happened and trying to just make a few $100 a day at it. So Dylan was playing with me all the time back then too. So we were just both bouncing ideas off of each other, and we really had no idea what we were doing, but we were just trying to learn as much as we could. And it helped, obviously, having a brilliant poker mind like him to help bounce ideas off of. I mean, now he's a published author, and he's a once instructor and a WPT champion. So, I mean, when you look at it in that context, it's pretty nice that I sought him out, his friendship at that Magic the Gathering tournament years before, because honestly, I don't think either of us would have made it in poker if it wasn't for that friendship. So yeah, I really value him. He's a good friend and easily one of the most reputable and kindest souls that I've met. So I cannot say enough nice things about him. He's just the best.
It's always good to have a good circle around you, especially from the beginning, because then, as you say, you can bounce off each other. If it wasn't for him, as you say, you might not have got where you've got now, and he'd probably say the same about you. So yeah, it's a,
I'd hope so.
Well, it's a tribute to each other. Now, whilst you were at college and that, you had a side job as a dishwasher, but obviously when you found out how lucrative online poker was, you kind of just thought, you know what?
Yeah, I mean, I had a bunch of remedial jobs coming up. I mean, I worked at a yogurt stand. I did call center work, which actually I quite enjoyed. I did sales over the phone one summer as a job. And then the big job I had I was a dishwasher at the biggest restaurant in Idaho in Coeur d'Alene. That was my summer job. And each summer I'd come back, I'd just be the head dishwasher. And it was a massive restaurant. I mean, like, you had endless amounts of work to do.
Yeah.
And then they had a sister restaurant in my college town. So when I started going to school, I started doing graveyard shifts, washing dishes back then. So I don't mind hard work at all. But it certainly taught me the value of a dollar, you know. And when you can make such good money playing poker, it's really difficult to go back to working an hourly for you know, very difficult work. So and once I discovered poker, I basically never went back to working any more remedial jobs.
I know you said that your mum and dad weren't happy about the poker jump, as in that was it. I'm done with uni. I'm done with work. I'm going to be a poker player. How did you break that to them that you were going to? Did you? I take it you said you had all the graphs and that, and you could show them evidence. Now, how did that come about?
Well, I mean, they just, you know, every time I'd go visit them, they'd be cutting out articles of job offers and job prospects for me and pushing them on me. And I'm like, listen, like, this is what I'm doing. Like you know, they knew that I'd been very successful at Magic the Gathering, that I'd traveled the professional tour for it. But it's really hard to get through that older generation. You can show them graphs and you show them data, and they're just still not going to believe it. And I mean, they're fair to have their concerns. Like, I wouldn't encourage anybody to be going into poker as a full-time profession, especially in nowadays climate. Now, back then, it was a gold mine. So, you know, I was very right to be getting into it back then. Whether or not, you know, it was a sound career choice is to be argued. You know, I think I've had a pretty good life. I've traveled all around the world, and I've eaten at nice restaurants and, you know, seen a lot of beautiful places and met a lot of wonderful people. So I wouldn't trade the experiences that I have for anything, really. Yeah. But I would also be super skeptical about somebody. When people come and tell me, oh, I want to become a professional poker player, my first advice is usually don't do it. You don't understand how difficult it is. I mean, over the years, I mean, I traveled the European Poker Tour for 10 years straight. Yep. You have a lot of friends that come and go, that go busto, that lose their minds. It's an extremely difficult game to succeed at the highest level. I mean, the failure rate is super high. But, you know, I knew that I had a good, strong mathematics background from my math competitions. I knew I was a pretty good gamer from my chess tournaments I played as a kid, and from the Magic stuff that gave me some validation. So I thought that I would be a little bit different than the average Joe coming from the blackjack table to try out poker. You know, like, I had a very academic approach to it. I was constantly trying to learn. And I never claimed that I was the best poker player in the world or anything, and I still don't. Like, really, my strength was just my work ethic. I just constantly registered. I mean, I probably played 100,000 online tournaments or something, you know, and like, the numbers of tournaments that I was playing back in those days are just astronomical. I was just putting in tons and tons and tons of volume, playing lots and lots of tables. So my work ethic was always there, and I was always trying to improve myself. So I think it was a good decision, but that wasn't easy to convince my parents. It wasn't really until 2010 when I won the EPT that it started to become like real for them. Like, oh, he actually does know what he's doing, you know, and that made things a little bit easier when you can wire $1 million into your bank account. And you're like, hey, look, mom and dad, like, it did work out. I remember telling them, like, looking at my graphs and my growth potential, I was like, I think I could be a millionaire within 5 years. And that was before I took off on tour in 2008. And really, it took me about 2 years. Now, back then, I didn't know anything about selling action or swapping. I mean, I just went out. I didn't know anybody in Europe. I just went out as a kid from Idaho and, like, tried it out. And when I did eventually win the big tournament, I had 100% of my action, which nowadays is super, like, uncommon. You know, I would free roll myself by winning my seat online, and then I just show up to the tournament, hope I cashed, and then, you know, they deposit money back in my PokerStars account, and I just go back to grinding all the tournaments again.
Now, online, I noticed you, because before I became a dealer, I used to play a little bit online. You have the weird, to some, as Imalucksac. Where did this originate from?
Well, I mean, I just stole it, basically.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. Dylan, on Party Poker back in the day, you could only have 9 characters for your name, right? And my name was I'm a Mark. But I didn't like that because I felt like people came after me. They're like, oh, this guy's a Mark. I didn't want the perception that I was a bad player, you know? And Dylan's name was Imalucksac, but it was Imalucksac because he could only have 9 characters, right? Yeah. And so when we graduated, we went our separate ways, and I had no idea he was going to pursue a career in professional poker. I was living with my girlfriend at the time, and I was just kind of playing in my free time at night. But when Party Poker shut down and Net Teller confiscated our funds, we made the move to PokerStars. And in PokerStars, I was like signing up for screen name, and I was like, I really like Dylan's screen name. So I just added a letter because I wasn't limited by 9 characters, and I put the K on there. So you can always remember the K is for Kevin. If you see Imalucksac on PokerStars without the K, that's not me. But basically, so we had 1 letter difference in names, and we're playing all the same tournaments all the time. So we must have been the most investigated accounts in the history of PokerStars. So I haven't ever done anything shady because we had to be investigated more than anybody. The amount of emails, I think later some PokerStars employee who worked in the security department said that our accounts had more emails sent in about them than almost anybody's, because people were thinking that we were colluding or doing whatever, which of course we never were. And yeah, so I basically just stole the name from Dylan. So sorry, Dylan.
If you're watching.